Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Good Girls. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we're picking up with, I forgot, the officer who Mick ended up killing a couple episodes back. Basically, amongst his evidence at his place, because Mick didn't notice it, he'd compiled everything and put it in an envelope the officer had about all that he had figured out about Rio and Nick and everything. And obviously an officer going through his stuff, which, that line is kind of sad, like, right, despite all your life, reduced to a single box. But she found it and ended up sending it to Phoebe. And now Phoebe's kind of been renewed now because now she realizes, like, it isn't just Rio. She now realizes the bigger play in all of that being Nick. And she goes to Dave for help, but Dave's kind of like, nah, let it go. Like, you've kind of been put on, like, suspension. You're kind of on the outs right now. She's like, I'm going to use my vacation time to, like, work on this. But then Dave's just kind of reluctant to kind of help her pull the trigger on this. He's kind of too busy, like, keeping things up with his wife, and he's working on the garden and everything. But ultimately, he ends up, deciding, hey, I'm gonna help you. I got vacation time. Well, I'm also gonna be staying with you because my wife left me. It's like, wait, what? Why? It's like, because I essentially he basically opened up to her and told her the truth about himself. So, and it's a thing of like, right, I'm gonna be staying here too. So he's like, I fart in my sleep, and she's like, I watch a. Essentially she watches a lot of porn. It's like, this is going to be great, which I'm like, I'm glad to see. I wasn't expecting them to come back into the story the way things played out, but it's interesting how, like other shows I'm watching that kind of have that similar thing of like, right, what goes wrong when something can go wrong, it does go wrong. In certain cases, when things go right, they just have a tendency, even when they go wrong, they have a tendency to go right. So I just wasn't expecting them to pop back in a show like this, and obviously, like, they have a better understanding of everything because it's not just Rio they're after Nick now, because it's like, no, you're the one pulling the strings, you're the one with kind of all the power, so basically cut off the head of the snake and everything, so he's the head of the snake. So along with all that, it's a conversation about Nick wanting to actually put he wants Beth to sign up for, like, get on the city council, and she's looking at it as an advantage because it's like, right, if I'm on the city council, that means we're protected. It's like, no, it makes you protected. But she's like, with the power of being on a city council, she has a lot more power to do stuff. Like, in case, like, one of them, like in particular Annie, ever ends up in a freezer again, she can do something about it. But then they obviously kind of hint to, like, oh, Nick wanting to, it's like, oh, it's actually cousin brother idea and everything about this. Is like, oh, okay. She's like, he didn't even ask me for it. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's like, right, we already know where things stand between you and Rio. They were doing the whole finger thing about, like, their last encounter, but also kind of hinting like, yeah, it's kind of like, it is interesting how, like, the men in that family have it bad for Beth. My only assumption is the reason, like, my thought was always, like, he always kept Beth close because it's like, right, I want to disarm her by making her think I'm an ally and I can use her. I wasn't sure for what purpose, but now, like, oh, she's on the city council, then that means he has a powerful ally. Like, this way you don't have to, like, someone is going to do what you ask willingly, where you don't have to, like, go to the trouble of blackmailing him or something like that. Like, Beth would feel like, no, Beth's going to feel like I'm on her side, so that means I can use her more efficiently than I would, get more flies with honey instead of vinegar. I know I butchered that metaphor, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, by showing a more kinder hand rather than handling things like blackmailing and forcing people like Rio, he feels like that's going to work in the long run. It's going to help him benefit from having, like, if Beth's in a powerful position, it means he has an ally that when he needs things to go and sway a certain way, Beth will do it willingly because it's like, right, he's built up such good, connections with her. Like, no, we're grown. She realizes I've always got her back, so she realizes she can count on me, type of thing. But obviously, once again, when it rains, it pours, and just things kind of going wrong on many different fronts. Annie, first and foremost, is kind of freaked out, because, aside from Ruby, Stan, and Beth, they're the only ones who know what happened to, the only ones that know what happened to Annie. So obviously, Kevin doesn't know, and he comes in, is like, whoa, what's, because she has a security system and everything. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go move in with Angela. And she's like, no, you don't have, I mean, you could even get Angela to move in here with us. It is a combination of jealousy and loneliness, but also just because she is legitimately scared, like she'd feel at least better, because Ben's not there all the time. So it's like, right, you could, that's why even later on, Ben's like, yeah, I'm coming over to get some stuff. She's like, hey, do you need like a water girl or something like that? Chaperone? Like, I can go with you, because she just doesn't want to be alone right now because she's scared. And she's not really showing that in front of Beth and Ruby, because I think for her, it's like, right, we're kind of in this together. We kind of have to show a united strong front. I don't want them to know I'm as freaked out as I am. But Kevin's just kind of like, he doesn't like, because, and Annie saying that actually broke my heart when she was like, I just don't want to be alone. He was like, me neither. So it's like, right, I want to be with someone that kind of wants me. And obviously he's wanted a thing between him and Annie, but it just never worked out. So it's like, yeah, just be roommates. And, they kissed and everything, but she was kind of pushing away. So for him, it's like, yeah, there's just nothing here. But me and Angela, there is something, I don't want to kind of keep waiting forever for something to happen between us, because there's no guarantee anything will. But it is a thing that Annie does like him. She actually likes him a lot more than she thought she would, because she realizes there's a lot more to Kevin, especially like how him and Ben hit it off, so her perspective on him's kind of changed. So that's kind of, she's legitimately terrified to sleep in her own place, especially because I can get to her because once again, he's never paid a house visit before. Like, once again, if they've ever been in a terrifying situation, it's together. So at least I think that made her feel like, okay, we're in this together. That was a situation she was all alone, having no idea how it was going to work out, because it's like, right, he has Beth and Ruby, and he might decide like I'm unnecessary and might remove me just to prove a point. So that's enough to terrify you. Obviously, with Ruby and Stan has to get rid of all the pocketbooks because what Ruby said last episode, just to spite that lady for trying to buy the strip club. At first, she was like, that's why the purse is fake. It's like, she shouldn't have said that. And now, like, this could ruin Harry's chance at the school and stuff like that. So, but they also need the money to pay for him being at the school. So, what are they going to do? Because he's like, wait, do you feel that? It's like, right, this is like deja vu, because it's like, obviously, Ruby trying to say like, this isn't on Beth, because Stan blames Beth a lot for stuff, which, to be fair, like, Beth is the root of a lot of stuff. But in this particular episode, Annie and Ruby play their own role, but it's like, both of them are desperate for money. So when Rio shows up and is like, right, you got to have done this, you've done that before, neither one really suited, but it's like, now this, running a strip club, he's like, now that I can get behind, like, being the money laundering operation. But Beth is like, no, this is ours, you have nothing to do with it. But then Ruby and Annie were like, no, like, what's our cut? Because they need the money because of their respective situations. So, right, so, because the purse situation isn't applicable because of what Ruby says, which she kind of drops that information later on. So she in particular needs this income, because they as a whole need the income if they want to if they were going to keep like everything, their entire lives above, every angle of their lives above float, upfloat, I should rather say. So, and it's kind of interesting because, like, for the first time, Annie and Ruby are the ones dictating the situation, and Beth's kind of like, wait, what? No, guys, we were already, it's like, no, we weren't completely out from underneath them. She's like, yeah, but at the very least, we were a lot more out from underneath them than we've ever been before. So it's kind of like, right, we kind of, dug ourselves back deeper into that situation, which is ironic considering it's usually Beth that digs them deeper into it. This time it was Annie and Ruby, which that's why I'm kind of like, which I think is so interesting. Like, Stan wants to put it on Beth. Beth was the one kind of saying, no, this time, and the others kind of did, which is also ironic with the Dean situation too, because it's like, this wasn't even Beth's decision to go like back and like underneath him and everything. It was them. So it's the irony is big and vast in this particular situation. I think, because it's all going to fall on Beth's shoulders, but it wasn't even her this time. But, she's kind of the head honcho. She's the one that kind of jump-started out a lot of this, so a lot of it falls on her shoulders regardless. Rightfully so, but in this particular situation, when it shouldn't, it will, Which, speaking of Dean and Stan, they both hand over evidence to their buddies to be like, hey, like, all right, this will be enough to put everything on Beth. But even now, Dean still is hesitating. Yes, he's angry at Beth, but still. Because even Dean being like, yeah, it's easy because it's not your wife, but Stan's like, well, yeah, she gets what she deserves, which is so cold-hearted to say. Once again, like, how do you think this is all going to work out? Because I guess for him, it's like, I can accept Ruby being mad at me. I mean, I guess it's a thing of she will never know that it was me. Because I guess if anything, it'll most likely look like Dean's the one that turned on Beth, so it won't look like he helped. I think that's probably what he's banking on, so he can at least like have some clear conscience about everything. At least that's kind of how I feel. That's the justification, because it was like, Ruby would never forgive you if you're responsible for sending Beth away, So I feel like it probably has to be like, it's all going to fall on Dean, so he won't get caught up in being like, yeah, I kind of helped like adding another nail to her coffin, essentially. But because even Dean was kind of shocked by like Stan's response, especially considering it's like, for one, your wife is in just as deep as my wife. Don't like play coy like that. But I guess it's like, nah, like my wife's in deep, but she's only in deep because of your wife. So it kind of comes back to that conversation. So Dean reluctantly kind of hands things over. Like I said, he's just angry because of the circumstances. But even later on, he's talking to Beth. And he's like, yeah, don't miss too many good nights. You never know how many you got left. And she's like, oh, they're not going to grow up that fast. So he's regretting it more and more. He's like, yes, he wants things to be reversed, but he said it himself. He's like, Beth, it's not like Beth ever cared about me. It's like, if Beth didn't care about you, she wouldn't have stuck around as long as she did. Like, the fact is, like, she did ultimately end up forgiving you for the cheating and all, basically the money theirs that you ended up being gone because of, like, he screwed up in many different regards. Yes, she has as well, but that's the whole argument too of like, right, how long should I like be so okay with her decisions just because of mine? It's like my sin shouldn't be an excuse for her to be able to do whatever she wants just because I screwed up. Doesn't give her free reign to for me to forever be in her debt so she can do whatever she wants. Once again, we're also talking about the same dude that shot him, so justify anger, but it's still the thing of, right, I'm sending away the mother of my children. Regardless of everything, Beth is still his wife, and he does love her and care about her. So, I don't know. But all the while this is happening, the ladies are trying to get the strip club started again, because they're like, all right, Crystal, could you get the girls back? Because, everything's happening. It's like, nah, they've all kind of moved on. Plus, like, Gene kind of sucked. It's like, no, don't worry. It's under new management. And it's like, who? And all three of them are looking at him kind of smiling like, it's us. And so Crystal goes around and recruits everyone from their different jobs, a nursing job, a mechanic, a corporate job, it seems like. So got everyone back, and it's like, yeah, things are going to be different. Like, we're kind of all in this together. Like, everyone has their say about how things are going to be operated. It's like the ladies are happy about that. So obviously, checking the club, making sure everything's straight. It's like, we're going to give everyone health insurance. They have a little section for like the kids and everything, which is actually I think that's very smart, because there's probably a lot of moms under that in that particular profession. So like having kind of like a play area, which I'm sure that's going to be a whole complicated thing too, like at a strip club having that. But I'm like, I think it would benefit, especially for mothers who can't get a babysitter, or it's actually cheaper not to have a babysitter, just to like, nah, we got this like playroom and stuff like that where the kids will stay in, and that way mama can do her dancing, get her money, and then like, it's not that much of an issue. Once again, probably potentially save you on money. So just interesting. But then all of a sudden we have like an association showing up and wanting to shut it down, which they never really fully answered it. But even I'm like, so how the hell did Gene get away having this place? But it's like, because this gave them the opportunity, because Gene was, I guess, it was already an established business at the time. It's been there for like the past like 10 years or something. So it was already an established business, but now that it was in changing over to new owners and stuff like that, our trio, then that kind of gave them the opportunity to finally like muscle out, because technically, because of the transfer over, it was a whole legal thing that kind of made it an opportunity, because I think it was already set in stone and already there before, like, so the mothers of that group of mothers couldn't really do anything. Side note, head honcho of that, I never actually knew that actress's name. I've seen her in so many things. I never knew her name is Ever. Also, she's a Carradine. I didn't know that. She's like, I think David and Keith are her uncles. I think I remember reading it. So I was like, because I've seen her in multiple things. Like, the thing that I always go to, like, more recently would probably be, like, Marvel's Runaways on Hulu. Like, I think that's the thing that comes to my mind. But, like, I've seen her in a multitude of things. Never knew that. For one, I just think Ever is a very pretty name. But also, once again, didn't even know she was a Carradine. That's so interesting. Because obviously it's like you've seen Keith most recently in Fear of the Walking Dead, so it's just interesting. Once again, tangents and all that aside, that was something that just popped into my mind. So obviously Beth goes to Nick for help with this, so it's like, well, how does she, and it's like, right, she's gonna have to like talk in front of like people, they decide this, and obviously right, like. There's all, their mothers being like, yeah, there's all this extra, like, crime and stuff like that happens because of the strip club and everything. And so Annie, her rebuttal was to basically quote Footloose, which I should note, I've never seen the movie Footloose. I've heard references to it. It's still kind of crazy to think, like, right, that, like, because I would never associate them, like, knowing what I know about the movie, never would have thought to myself, that's a Kevin Bacon movie. I mean, to be fair, it's like, Kevin Bacon also did Tremors. I'm not saying like it's a bad thing or something like, oh, that's beneath Kevin Bacon. It's just crazy to think about, like, right, would I know Kevin Bacon from like some of the shows I know him from and stuff like that, like The Following, obviously being an X-Men, but also like most recently City on a Hill, like considering those characters, and you think about Footloose and Tremors and who he was in Tremors, it's so weird. I mean, that's the interesting thing about actors' careers when you look at the different vast amount of characters and stories they've been in. It's just one of those things where you're like, oh, it's interesting comparing different characters they played. That's all it is. But once again, it's just like, it's a movie I'm aware of that I've just never seen. I think I've seen sections of it, but I don't think I've ever seen like a lot of it, Regardless, I just love that she went through the trouble of, it's like, right, like, Beth is like, I try to convince her out of it, and, Ruby's like, well, it worked for Kevin Bacon, and then you had Beth come up to lay it out, like, right, this business, actually does well, first and foremost, she brought up the fact is there's a whole bunch of, it's like, yeah, you're a mother, I'm a mother too. They're also mothers. It's like, yeah, my child's in the first grade, mine's in the third, mine's in college, and it's like, whoa, she looks great. I know, dang. I was like, yeah, like, when'd you have your kid when you were like 10? Like, holy shit, So that was crazy. But also, it's like, right, there's a lot of businesses that benefit from it. There's a lady who runs a sports bar. Like, a lot of guys will go there to pregame, so that helps her out. There's the jewelry store dude. He's like, yeah, a lot of guys feel guilty, so they buy stuff for their wives, so it benefits him. There's also the donut shop dude. He was like, yeah, from like 2 a.m. to like 5 a.m. my business is usually really good, and it's going down now. So this isn't just about, supporting mothers. This is also about supporting, like, the economy of this area. So it's all for the betterment. And obviously it comes down from, like, 4 to 3. So that all worked out. So everything works out for them. They're able to, they put up their little permit from, and it's got their names on it and everything. It's like, yeah, we're open for business. Like, yeah, now the ladies are running a strip club. So I don't think they've ever worked a business together over the course of the show. Like, anytime there's ever been something of like, right, it's meant to be a front, it's always been like, well, Beth's job before gave them the place that they could work, do their laundering and stuff like that, and forging, the money and everything. Other than that, like, I could be misremembering, but I don't think there's ever anything that there's never been a front over the course of the show that all three of them have worked at together. I think this is a first, which is really interesting. But aside from all of this, there's also the situation where Stan, now finding out that Ruby's neck deep in all this, which I love that she brought a stripper pole, got a stripper pole at home and everything, and it's like, nah, like, he's like, what am I, just a piece of meat? She's like, nah, tonight you're a fireman. And obviously finding out, like, Ruby's as much of a part of it. Her name's on things now. It's not just Beth. So if Beth goes down, Ruby and Annie, which I feel so bad. It's like, who's looking out for Annie? Because it's like, yeah, Beth's going down. Now Ruby's going to be okay. What about Annie? Like, come on, Dean, that's your sister-in-law. You're not going to, it's like, it's sad to know that, like, which I'm sure that's even a much more, it's it's poetic in an effed up way. We actually think about it, because Annie's the one that got kidnapped and everything. She's the one that always has to prove her. She had to like prove her worth last episode, at least prove like, no, I'm useful and everything. And it's like, right, even in this conversation about like, right, I'm gonna take down Beth and I'm gonna go to protect Ruby. Who's looking out for Annie? That's super, super messed up when you think about it. I mean, because it's like, I don't know. It's actually kind of sad that like no one's thinking about Annie, So. But regardless, now that things have kind of turned to this, Stan's got no choice but to go to Breckenmeyer's character to be like, I need your help. He's like, yeah, I would help you if you were one. I was like, oh man, you keep dragging people into this legitimate pyramid scheme of yours with this cream and everything, which I guess Dean's no longer kind of like, well, you kind of forced him to stay around, but I guess he's all about it now. The brotherhood, the camaraderie and everything like that. Stan's kind of forced. It's like, yeah, they're setting that up to be like a very interesting like side plot, because I think that's going to turn into some like dubious stuff. I guess dubious wouldn't be the right word. Let's go more diabolical. I think that's going to be a whole issue in itself, not just like the legal stuff of like, oh, let's try and take down Beth with that. I'm like, that whole operation, especially the way that guy runs it, especially like it's like he's getting those kids to do whatever they're doing for like those Boy Scouts, whatever the hell that was at the end of the episode. But now Stan's asking him, it's like, yo, like I need you to slow roll things. He's like, all right, talk about this in the next meeting and stuff like that. He's like, I'll be there. Yeah, you will. So, and this is all happening behind Dean's back. So that's going to be, because Dean's probably, because Dean did promise that Ruby wouldn't take the fall on any of this. It's all going to fall on Beth, but he probably knows if he brings this up to Dean, Dean's going to be a little self-preservation-y. I think he'd still hold back. He'd be like, right, I'll have Stan's back, but now Stan's kind of going behind his back, so I'm sure things are going to kind of fall apart there. I mean, to be fair, I don't think Dean and Stan have had a couple scenes over the course of the show. They've never necessarily been tight, So, once again, it's always interesting because, like, a lot of, like, the trio's lives are super separate from each other. Like, there's overlap every once in a while, but it's super rare over the course of the show. Like, there's never been a lot of interaction between Dean and Stan and Greg, right? I'm always blanking on I always blank on Annie's ex's name. I think it is Greg, right? Like, there's never been, I mean, we don't know like prior to the show like what their interactions were, but I don't think they've had like much crossover in that regard. It's just interesting. Speaking of Annie, I also love the fact is that she decides to try to ruin things for Kevin when she the whole Angela thing where it's like, right, let me show up at your work and tell you about all these disgusting habits that Kevin has. It's like, oh yeah, here's his bucket. It's like, well, he uses that bucket. It's like, yeah. Oh, you also want to buy a whole bunch of this. It's like, right, with his hygiene and stuff like that, you might want to, on the safety side. And it's like, she's like, wait, like, are you doing this? She's like, I don't know whether you're doing this because you're jealous, you're lonely, or you're a psycho. But she's like, I accept Kevin for who he is. Like, he's unique. So, and he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, yeah, more power to you. But it was like, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting her to go down the breakup route. Like, when Ben mentioned all those other, like, pals of his, I thought what was going to happen is that she was going to try and invite all of them to start living in her place so she'd have more people around. I thought that's what it was, but it's like, no, she's, like, trying to, but, like, who knows how much is like stuff that he was really being honest about, because later on he's in her place and it's like he replaced the lock and everything, and then he's like, yo, what's up with this? And he's like, yeah, so apparently Angela was kind of weird. You seen that episode of Hoarders with the lady with the dead cats? It's like, nah, she was like that with like rotisserie chickens. Like, she would eat on them for like weeks, and there was like a whole bunch around. I'm like, is that really the real deal, or was he just joke? I couldn't tell whether he was being for real about that. And it's like, oh, and she's like, really, you left because of that? He's like, well, that's what you wanted, right? And obviously Annie's like, are you mad at me that I kind of ruined your relationship? He's like, at first I was, but then he's like, honestly, I've never been needed by anyone. And she's like, I've never been needed by anyone either, because I think, kind of feels that role of like, yeah, she's kind of unappreciated in her role and everything. I mean, to be fair, don't get it twisted. Like, Ruby and Beth missed her like missed Annie like crazy last episode, and they were terrified and worried for her. But I think it is a thing of like she feels unwanted and unneeded. I mean, Ben's very independent in his own right, so it's like, who really needs me or really relies on me? So for someone else, like, that's what they kind of feel that role for each other. Like, right, I've never actually been needed by someone, So I think that's such an interesting development. And also, like, how happy she is to have Kevin back and everything. It's just, like I said, I'm just not sure if, like, what he was saying about Angela was the truth, or was he just trying to say that at first just to kind of make Annie not feel as bad. Like, maybe that is real, but it wasn't as much of an issue for him. I don't know. I didn't know like I said, I'm probably an idiot for I just wasn't quite sure how to interpret that. But an interesting development on that front. But because of everything, it is interesting, too, because I skipped over it, but there is that conversation between Rio and Nick about handling Beth. Because it's like, right, once again, Nick's trying to take the softer approach. Rio's kind of like the more, like, rougher approach. Because he's like, nah, you don't need to just kind of give her an extending a hand. It's like, you need to, kind of pull her hair a little bit. And obviously later on, Nick sends Rio the bottle for like, oh, thanks for pulling her hair. Like, the whole strip club situation was supposed to like force her hand so she'd come for him for help so he can, do his thing. Which Rio was staring at the drink at first. He's like, just pour it down the drain. Because he's a little territorial in this, because it's like, right, Beth is kind of like, despite everything, he's in his own, like, once again, they both kind of have it bad for Beth, especially Rio, because despite everything, she shot you, she screwed you over multiple times, and you still have a thing for her. But I think it's more so like the thing of like, yeah, she's kind of mine. I'm the one that kind of brought her into this fold. Like, she's kind of been mine to mold. I don't appreciate you. And even the question of Beth being like, what is he to you? It's like, he's blood. Because it's like, he's not my brother, but he's blood. He's family, So that's kind of what that comes down to. But Beth now sees Nick for who he really is. Because obviously, Dave and Phoebe showed up, and it's like, hey guys, and we didn't get to see the scene, but it's like, right, it'll give them the lowdown. So now she realizes, like, right, because for so long she thought like, oh, I had an ally against Rio. Oh no, this is the person that's been backing Rio. He's the reason why the deal with the Secret Service didn't work out, and why my family's kind of being threatened again. So he's the one really pulling the strings. So she's going to play along with what he wants, just to kind of give, I guess, Secret Service what they need to finally take him down and free all of them from all of this. So many interesting threads being, extended and twisted and turned in this episode. It's going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of these threads take us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.